Hurricane Ike wasn't the strongest storm on record, but it was massive, unpredictable, and devastating.
I was on the ground, experiencing Ike as it tore through the Texas coast.
I was in the studio tracking every frame, while my family wrote it out at a home in Houston.
The scale, the impact, the human cost, that storm left a mark.
And after Ike, we started talking more about storm surge, uncertainty, the full scope of risk. This is our story of Hurricane Ike.
And
what it taught us. In our first two segments, we talked about getting ready for Hurricane Ike and then also the night of Hurricane Ike. Now let's talk about the aftermath. So you get up, and we never really went to bed anyway. So Saturday morning comes along. What did you see?
Walked out and just saw a lot of standing water all over the place. The whole place was flooded. And I don't believe it was from the storm surge, because I think the wall protected us, but just the freshwater rainfall that occurred. There were significant areas that had been blocked off. The whole island was extremely hard to navigate through because of all the standing water that had.
And it was interesting that day. It continued to rain.
It did.
Throughout the day, and we had flood warnings.
Yes.
Far after the storm had made landfall, and so where I was inland a little ways, so we had the water coming down the bayous, coming back out and running into what was left of that storm surge. But the other thing was, a lot of us got through the storm pretty well, but then we started getting images and video of what had happened on the Bolivar Peninsula, which was complete devastation.
And I do remember in Galveston, we did have some destruction. I remember going out and seeing the piers the day before, walking out there after. They were not there. There was quite a bit of damage across a lot of the properties and the buildings there on the wall itself, most likely, wind damage and such. But I do recall helicopters flying over nonstop. And they weren't landing on Galveston Island. They were going to the Bolivar Peninsula. And you could see that. And you had this feeling in the back of your mind like, oh no, something bad happened there.
Really bad.
Yeah.
Well, and that is why when it happened, it was a Category 2 storm, but people were saying it was the storm surge of a Category 5 storm.
Right.
Which is not true. It was the storm surge of a Category 2 storm. But the thing is, Ike was so big. It was like more than 500 miles across, which made it able to push more water.
Yes, exactly. Almost like Katrina, just referring back. It was such a big, it only made landfall as a Category 2, if I recall as well.
2 to 3.
Same kind of deal. But it was so big and so strong that it just pushed so much water up, and Ike had that same deal.
And that's why Ike, a lot of people don't remember it, but Ike was a pivotal point in forecasting for hurricanes, because after that, we started getting, things were changing. Like, we're gonna get a storm surge forecast plus a wind forecast, and then they started to separate the hazards, and all of that really, it was in process, but Ike was the catalyst that made all these changes in forecasting.
Right, because to separate the wind and the surge, really important, obviously, because in this case, Bolivar Peninsula, maybe not saw the direct winds.
Yeah.
Man, did they see the surge.
And it had a storm surge was 25 feet. And also, we had storm surge all the way into Louisiana. That had storm surge up to 25 feet because the storm was that large. And so we had all those kinds of things. And so that's why Ike is one of those storms that pivotal, that will be remembered. A lot of people won't remember it. I mean, you and I will, because we lived through it. My family came out fine. But the fact that so many changes came after that.
It did, yeah. And it changes for the better, obviously, here. And hopefully we can say now that that it was a lesson well learned. That the surge forecast that we have now is so important and has saved lives since that time.
And even now, with the hazards that we'll get, I mean, if some systems will produce more tornadoes, some are more on gusty winds, some are flooding. But so we started getting those separations, which I think has helped people prepare better.
Which is so important, because when you say Category 2 hurricane, and that basically is supposed to cover all the hazards, people aren't going to react as much, especially when it comes to things like storm surge.
And people will say, is it just a Category 1 or a Category 2 storm? So we learned from that as well.
We did, and I learned that it is not just a Category 2 storm. I was scared of those winds. I definitely I definitely found out how strong these hurricanes can be. Even a hurricane that is not technically a major status. I mean, walking out and seeing the whole side of our hotel, you know, all the damage that the side of the hotel basically just kind of ripped off. Yeah, definitely was a lesson.
Anyone I've ever spoken to who've actually lived through the heart of a hurricane, they've almost every single one of them will say, "I will never do that again," and so they will always evacuate, which is a good thing to do. So that's our wrap up of Hurricane Ike, and hopefully you've heard some things that have kind of maybe hoped to push you in the direction of getting more prepared and looking at the season as a bigger picture of being prepared. Doesn't have to be a big deal, but it certainly can make a huge difference.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.